And we are live. Welcome to episode. What is this now? Three.
Three.
Episode
Three.
three.
Yep.
Three. It's
And
not been
episode
enough to
three.
lose count with.
Yeah, it's not been long enough. But today's episode is about issues, not our personal issues. This isn't that kind of podcast. But issues to do with software development, issues that we faced in our systems that we worked with, and just riff from them. So I think,
They may reflect our personal issues, but that's another
yeah,
day.
yeah, yeah, our personal issues with these issues,
The day
but
might not even come.
Yeah.
yeah.
So, who would like to go first? Any memorable issues or something?
I don't know, no memorable issues, but the most recent that comes to mind is like the two major issues that happened at AWS and Google recently. I think the one at Google was because of some resource allocation issue, and the one at AWS was because of some some system OS thread limit that caused a cascading failure. And that kind of reminds me of something we had faced once, where again it was similar. We had a few Varnish web accelerators running in front of our services, and what happened was when there was a surge in traffic, what happened was that the underlying system was not allowing Varnish to spawn enough threads to keep itself alive. So it ran into an issue where like there was a system imposed thread limit of, I don't know what the thread limit was, but it was pretty low. And Varnish needed to spawn more threads as the traffic increased, and it couldn't do that. So Varnish kept marking itself down, and we like spent maybe a week or so just figuring out what caused this issue, because it was so kind of random. It used to happen when traffic used to spike, and that also only sometimes when it was large enough to kind of warrant spawning that many background threads. But yeah, eventually we did figure out that there was a systemly imposed limit of some number which was choking a varnish. And then we increased that to a very high value, and things kind of quietened down after.
Yeah. When things don't work, chuck more resources at it.
Chuck Morris was exactly.
Yeah, that's a great philosophy for a short while. Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's not your problem anymore. So
Yeah,
we're good there, I think.
yeah,
Yeah. The thing about Google is that every time Google goes down, every social media is literally flooded with memes and jokes and questions
yeah,
about Google. Like almost every Reddit thread was about hey, Google this, Google's down, Google's down.
yeah. I
I
mean,
remember just seeing that 500 on YouTube and
yeah,
Meet, and like someone's getting fired for this.
yeah, yeah.
But that was
Poor
not the
things,
case.
man. You kind of feel
I,
for those
I
engineers
thought it was
You
just
never know.
they've kept it up for so
yeah, man.
long with no issues, and then one day when things go wrong for like 45 or so, that's it, man. These guys are getting fired.
Yeah, yeah. Seriously, it's still it's still better than Stack Overflow or something going down.
Yeah,
Because Stack Overflow going down
yeah,
for programmers is just
dude.
like
Yeah,
what are you going to
Dude,
do now?
actually, I had to download
single
something
point of
for
failure.
from
The
Drive
true
to
single
continue
point of
doing my
failure
work.
is Stack Overflow. Sorry, Darshil. You were saying. I had to get that punchline in there. Sorry. Go ahead, Darshil.
No. I was just saying that even when Google went down, I had to pause my work because I actually needed some file from Google Drive to continue doing my work.
Yeah,
Oh
we
yeah,
had.
yeah,
Otherwise, it went.
definitely. Work was
Yeah,
definitely paused because literally every group on our work chat was going like, hey,
mm,
this is down, hey, this is down. Like, yeah, Google's down, dude.
Well,
Font
since
files are
we
not loading. What the fuck do I do?
well,
How do
since we
I
don't
help it?
use Google Cloud services, but were Google Cloud services also down? I
anything
haven't
that
checked that.
required auth, I think, was down. So Google Cloud
Oh,
included.
Oh,
Um,
right. Even our
so
Grafana dashboards, if you logged out, you were
yeah,
out. You were out of
yeah,
Grafana. You
because they
can't
because of
use
view
the
any of the
SSO.
stuff.
yes, yes,
Google, yeah.
Right, right, right. Man, it was pretty funny though. It was just one group chat after another wherever you like, hey, is this down? Hey, is this down? Hey, is this down? Hey, is this down? Damn. We should have just send them a meet link, I guess. Like, yeah, it's down. Why don't you discuss it?
yeah. And
Why don't you
I
ask your questions over here on this link, Meet link, Google Meet?
yeah, exactly. And G Suite is probably used by both like people like us who even use it for technical correspondence, and people even using Sheets or anything in in that realm.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
Gmail basically. You can't send mails if you're using Gmail. That's huge.
True.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, and I actually checked the RCA that Google had put out, and one of the lines there said that that Google engineers were alerted about this issue within 1 minute of the failure starting. And I'm just like that must require an alerting system that is so kind of on point. Do any of the apps that you guys have developed or maintain have that level of alerting that you're within a
Dude,
minute
they
or
don't have that
within
level of
10,
traffic.
right?
we're we're quite okay when there is one person who logs in once in an hour because he looks like something is done.
Yeah,
It's totally fine.
No,
We are
actually,
not
our
the largest
DevOps,
search engine in the world.
our SREs have actually built, orchestrated all our Docker containers such that alerts are triggered properly through Prometheus. So props for them
right.
for setting up all the alerts properly. Well,
Yeah, man.
I don't think alerts. Do you think alerts should be set up from developer end? I mean, within your code, because I find that very strange. Like
I
you're
don't think
supposed to
so.
send a
It's
flop
weird to couple. It's weird to couple the health check with
business
the
logic.
application. No?
I don't
Yeah,
think he means
business logic
application
with
though. I think he means should developers set alerts, which I think is okay when they're application specific.
Yeah,
If they're system
that's
specific,
totally
then
fine, I guess.
yeah.
Yeah. Why not?
Because some errors
If it's
are
just a
such.
sanity health check or something, it's totally cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or anything like
right. For example,
yeah. Good.
I mean, I set up alerts for my background jobs. Like when a background job actually, so there's this background job that removes inactive Google accounts that we use. So, so whenever we find inactive accounts, I send a alert through a webhook into our chat app Flock. So that's the kind of alerts I usually set. But resource related alerts like Redis has failed or something like that, or
Yeah,
some other service has failed or disk is full, these shouldn't be done by developers, right?
yeah, I
I
agree.
guess not, because we're usually not the ones in charge of that particular box or something. It all
Yeah,
depends. I mean, if you are the one who's managing that box, then yes. But then I
Yeah,
guess
but that shouldn't be the
it's a
case,
dual
right?
role then. Yeah, I mean, it depends. If the company wants a two for the price of one thing, हाँ DevOps भी कर ही ले.
yeah,
But yeah, unless you don't have a specific SRE or DevOps guy who's just looking at that particular thing, you probably shouldn't do that yourself.
right. So what kind of tools do you guys use to alert? The alerts that you mentioned, Darshan. You just use a
Oh, we
webhook to
use
post to.
so for my application alerts, I use the webhooks itself. Whereas for resource related alerts, DevOps uses Prometheus for logging all the metrics, CPU usage, and all that. Um, and we use Grafana to view our logs from Prometheus. And one more, right? And Prometheus itself sends you alerts, I believe. Yeah,
Okay.
Prometheus has that feature.
Right. So Prometheus is basically has a client server kind of model where you have an app, an instance of Prometheus or whatever running on all of your infrastructure, and that kind of pushes data continuously about your systems to some central, I don't know, aggregator.
Yeah, I believe from what I remember, there's a some sort of a daemon running on every serving
Right.
box that keeps on pushing metrics to your main Prometheus server,
Right.
and there you can query all the logs or all the metrics on a Prometheus server using their own custom query language called PromQL. It's
Oh,
pretty intuitive.
right.
Yeah.
I wonder how
I
people
don't know.
handle alerts on alerting systems. What happens if your alerting system goes down and you don't know about it?
That
Is this
is
a
handled
who
by
polices the police kind of a question?
your
Yeah,
Is
cloud
that another
provider, right?
Prometheus server?
yeah.
Your
A
cloud
Prometheus
provider will
running on
give
the
you
Prometheus
alerts, right?
aggregator. Sorry, what did you say?
Your cloud provider will give you alerts, right, if your Prometheus servers are down.
Yeah. I mean, I'm
Ah,
just hypothesizing. What if everything was yours and you weren't using a cloud provider? What would you do if if the thing that's supposed to alert you itself goes down.
It's down. Write a
Yeah.
cron.
You need to have some
To
kind of
check.
self-referential thing
Yeah.
where check if I am up.
Yeah.
Maybe the
It seems like
Prometheus
it's
server
strangely gonna.
itself has a daemon, and it's
Right.
I mean they are pretty. I'm pretty sure they have high availability infra sort of setup. The multiple servers work in unison. So if one server goes down, the data is still there, and the other two servers can query that data.
Yeah, probably.
So you
Makes
need
sense.
They
to
must. Yeah.
architect properly the
Correct.
infrastructure.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I think.
It's built. It was originally built at SoundCloud, apparently, according to the docs. Just looking at the
Prometheus.
docs, built in 2012.
What is this that's built in 2012?
Nice.
Prometheus,
Okay, Prometheus.
Prometheus.
SoundCloud.
Interesting. A lot of these things originate at some or the other, company based on some or the other need, and then just get open source.
Yeah. It's awesome that the companies then decide to open source it.
Yeah, yeah. It
Yeah.
is. I mean, I'm sure
Like
internally they
Kafka.
maintain like a more advanced version of it, or maybe that's not even something that they would want to do if their core business is not.
Don't most projects have like a beta branch or like a latest release branch or something? And they can tag whatever stable version they have. So
They
that I mean they don't need to really maintain a separate repository or something.
No, I
They can
mean,
just make do with the
a
actual.
part. I mean, a version of your system is closed source, and a very basic version of it is only open source. Now, you wouldn't want the source code to be out there in certain cases. In these cases, maybe not because SoundCloud is not really. They don't deal in this business, so they have no reason to capture or keep some part of that code base with them. But yeah, you see a lot
I
Yeah,
of
always
probably.
wonder
premium things.
I always wonder if this open sourcing projects is like the pro bono equivalent of law firms. Like some law firms have to do pro bono work, right?
Right, right,
Sure.
And these tech companies have to
right.
pro bono
Yeah, well,
do
I
pro
think
bono
it's
work
a
while open
combination of
sourcing
both
them.
because if you keep it within your own community, then your developers have to kind of maintain it and keep it up to date with all your requirements. But if you put it out there in the wild, then the community will kind of take it forward, so you can focus back on what you kind of intend to do, your main business, and spend very little resources on this particular project because your little resources is now pooled with everything else that everybody else in the world is throwing at it, and that so it still gets
Plus, it
enough
becomes
attention
battle tested
and battle tested. Yeah,
because many people put out
yeah,
issues
yeah,
regarding problems and everything.
yeah, exactly.
Speaking of issues, what about
Yeah.
some personal issues that you faced with your projects? I mean,
What about issues that you guys have caused?
caused.
Oh, I know Rohan
Because
has.
that
Oh, I
that will be a
remember.
fun chat.
I remember I deleted a Elasticsearch index. So you remember Sense Kibana's Sense plugin before
No.
Kibana had its own. Okay, you know about Kibana
Yeah,
itself.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so to query Elasticsearch, you need to send HTTP requests, and you
Yeah.
get JSON response, right? So
Yeah.
you had to either do this through curl or on the CLI or through the browser. But browsers, it was a bit iffy to get that post JSON body in your request to get the response, right? You needed to query Elasticsearch through get parameters. So your only option to properly do this was through CLI using curl or HTTP. Uh, but then Kibana, the visualization tool for Elasticsearch, they had a plugin called Sense. This was before Kibana itself had the dev console. So what this Sense plugin does was that there was a left panel. In the left panel, in the left panel you enter your queries and JSON bodies, and on the right
No,
side.
we're fine, Darshan.
we get it. The other
Figure
On
it
side.
out.
the right side, On the other side, you had the whole response structure, JSON response structure. So it was like an IDE where it used to auto format your JSON and all that, and you press Control Enter and it runs your query. It gives you a response. So the
Okay.
one bug with this Sense plugin was that you had a text box at the top that would, in which you would enter the IP of the Elastic server that you would want to query. So you could change the Elasticsearch IP and the query that you run will hit that server. So the problem with this text box was, so there are two text boxes, your query editor and your input text box for the server IP or host. So whenever you press enter on the server IP to change the, you know, change the server
IP.
that you're querying, it also used to run the query that where your cursor was. So if your cursor on the query text box was on some query like get me all the customers with names containing Alex or something like that, uh, so that query would run. So if you change the IP of the Elasticsearch box at the top, press enter, then your cursor, which was down at the other text box, that query would run, this get query, this search query. So one time what happened was that my cursor was on a delete query and I shifted the server IP and pressed enter, and the delete query also ran along with it, along with changing the IP address.
And then
So
Yeah.
all our data for that index
is gone.
got deleted. Yeah. Luckily, we could easily generate it through a backend. We had a whole backend process. So we just had to
Right.
run the Elasticsearch population script because all the data was on SQL, MongoDB. I think it was on
Oh,
MongoDB.
so it was backed
So
by
all
some
we had to
guys.
do was export the Mongo data. Yep.
Lucky
So it
escape.
wasn't
Oh,
that
okay.
big of a oopsie, but our APIs were down because Elasticsearch didn't have any data for that short
I
while.
I have a
Mhm.
relatively major oopsie as you mentioned. I once so there was this so the way we normally deploy stuff is we rsync to a particular subfolder in var www. So what I was trying to do is I was trying to make the destination folder dynamic. So based on the kind of subfolder the user has selected, the code was supposed to rsync to that particular folder. So I don't know exactly how it happened, but the subdirectory thing, the parameter in the bash expansion was null. So instead of rsyncing to like slash var slash www slash the subdirectory, it just rsync to slash
That
var
one
slash www, and like a
overwrote everything.
shitload of admin sites just went down. Thankfully, it was a really easy fix. They just had to run build jobs again, and we were sorted. But yeah, that was a
Oh.
pretty major fuck up though.
Yeah.
Wait, but
Luckily,
do you
nothing
Yeah.
was.
rsync, not
Nothing
delete
was.
files?
So there is a delete. So there's
Or
a
you
delete
didn't put the
command that we
flag?
have that we do usually need to rsync and make sure that the latest code is there in place.
Yeah, but there's a
But
flag that doesn't allow rsync to delete files, even if the new push doesn't have those files.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying that the code that we had did use the delete flag.
Oh, it did use it.
I
Then what
suspect
was
you
the
would
Yeah,
problem?
need
it's
What was
supposed.
it?
to.
It was supposed to.
Yeah. You would need to
So what was the
remove
problem?
files that
Because
are
nothing
no.
was deleted, right?
No, he
So
was
that
deleted,
was the.
right?
So Darshal, I wanted to rsync my code to var www ka subdirectory, and
Huh.
instead it rsync to var www.
www.
Yeah, and so all the sites that were in var www were deleted.
But you put in the flag to not delete shit, right?
I didn't.
Oh, you
So that is
didn't. Okay.
They
the
needed. They
flag.
probably.
The flag is to delete. The flag the command line argument is
Okay,
dash
that's
dash
not the
delete.
default. Okay.
Yeah. So dash dash delete
Oh.
is what deletes all the files that don't match. So that is the fuck up that happened. But thankfully,
Oh.
it was very easily solved. Or
Yeah.
Yeah.
Run builds.
And
I
luckily, you
might
didn't
have
have
helped to
any
interact on that.
files that were just put there manually. So luckily, everything was run by
Yeah,
continuous integration.
CI/CD
No,
pipeline.
actually,
Yeah.
there were files that were put in manually, like the environment files. But
Right.
thankfully, those were part of the rsync exclude. So yeah,
Okay.
That was a close one, man.
Right.
I nearly shit my pants. It was fucked up. It was genuinely, yeah. And plus,
Horrifying
this
experience.
happened relatively late at night. I just wanted to put something on stage and then fuck off home, but I guess RSing had other plans. Now,
Yeah.
whenever I make change to the build script, I always use the dry run flag. Like, let me see that it's gonna rsync where it's supposed to, and then we'll remove the dry run and run it finally.
Right.
Rather than, so you use the bash script sort of build process, right, in Jenkins,
Yeah.
where you edit a bash script. So we shifted from that to pipelines, Jenkins pipelines, where you just write in a Groovy script and it'll do, I mean, it'll run the whole build process rather than syncing everything to there.
But
It'll,
essentially, that still reduces down to syncing only, no? The Groovy script just partitions your work into chunks. I
yeah.
think, yeah.
So so if the rsync part you put into a plugin, then you won't make mistakes, is what I feel. But now we don't even use rsync because we're using Docker, right?
Right.
So for
Yeah.
Docker,
Sure.
you won't need the rsync part, which prevents these sort of mistakes.
Fair.
Right.
This was definitely a user problem, not a not a system problem.
System,
Yeah.
This is classic webcat.
Yeah. Even I've had one of these instances where I broke something. It wasn't something that I broke, and I mean, of course, no one breaks anything intentionally, but it was something like it was a very peculiar kind of a bug that occurred only in with very specific inputs. What we are doing is we were kind of performing a migration where we were changing a particular data source from which some data was fetched, right? So we used to, I think, have it in Redis and also a duplicate copy in SQL. And we were fetching it from Redis, and we wanted to just switch completely to the backing store and not use Redis at all. And what happened was that for some very specific instances, for very specific keys, the data was inconsistent between what was in Redis and what was in the SQL. So what happened was we performed the migration and things overall looked fine. So we said, okay, great, successful day out, and logged off for the day. And then at like something like 3 a.m. or 4 a.m., my phone rang. Of course, I was fast asleep, didn't wake up. And by the time I woke up in the morning, it turned out that a particular client or one of our clients was kind of reached out to us saying, like, there's an issue with your request going to your domain on all of our pages. What's going on? And so there were like 5 or 6 missed calls throughout the night. Fortunately, came online, and within probably the first 5-10 minutes, we kind of figured out that this was where the problem was. So and luckily we hadn't shut down the Redis instance, which would have completely purged the data. It was still there in case we need to revert. So we just did a quick revert. Then we ran like a background job to bring those two data sources to a consistent level and sync. And then did it again. And that's the second time it worked like a charm.
I've heard my seniors doing RMRF/ on servers.
Whoa.
Holy shit.
And they had access.
But thankfully that doesn't work.
Yeah.
No, they had access and it did work.
Oh.
What? Dude, you have to give
confirmation.
You have to give a flag. You have to give a specific flag, no? -- something. I don't remember now.
-- I'm an idiot.
Is it? No, because I remember my seniors still getting teased for that one incident many other.
God damn. Well, I know someone who executed chmod 777 / by mistake.
Oh,
and
with a recursive?
just...
I mean, of course, otherwise it wouldn't have been an issue.
But I don't think it matters whether it was recursive or not.
It is, right? Because
if you just change the permission of /, it just fucks up.
Okay, in general, it fucks up. Okay.
So then, thankfully, it was a local thing, so they just had to reinstall their operating system, I guess.
Right.
And also it was Ubuntu, so it was
Have you guys ever faced issues where a revert wouldn't have, like your, like Darshan's issue where he ran the delete query, that was easily revertible because you know what data you lost and you knew how to restore it. Have you ever faced an issue where the solution is not to revert, like something fundamentally has changed either in your traffic patterns or usage patterns, that the only fix is fixing the code itself and performing a deployment? There's no revert, there's nothing you can do, throw more resources, nothing that you can do. It's just you have to come up with a solution.
Yeah.
This is we didn't
Yeah,
come up with a
that
solution.
usually happens
So
when there is a major database change. So there's a completely different team that handles databases, and I guess whenever there is a major chunk of database changes and there is a corresponding major chunk of code changes, once the database changes are live, we just hope that nothing is messed up so bad that we need to revert, because then reverting becomes like a like a huge issue, genuinely. So at that point, the only choice we have is to just move forward and fix the solution. Thankfully, it doesn't happen often that we need to sort of run towards that, but yeah, if something goes wrong when there is a major change, a schema change or something, then
Right.
we're quite vulnerable in that instant, at least.
Right.
I couldn't call this an issue, but and we couldn't even revert anything. This solution was to just leave the data, because our initial goal was to take all the data from a Kafka topic where everything was getting logged into SQL DB and Microsoft SQL to stitch and produce metrics. So what happened was that the data that was being logged, so the whole pipeline wasn't being made. All we were doing is logging data into Kafka. After Kafka, we didn't start anything. So when I started working on the pipeline, I realized that one key data point, one key field was not being logged, because of which we couldn't stitch our data. We couldn't stitch impressions and clicks together. So we had to abandon all the old data. So
Oh,
for that, for that we got a lot of
yeah.
slack. I don't know.
Flag. You didn't
Flack,
get slack. Did people shout at you? In that case, you got flag. If people just let it go, you got slack.
Yeah,
Okay,
Those
yeah,
flag
we got a lot of flack for that.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yep.
But yeah, this has happened to me as well. Where so schema changes, I think, are at least in part reversible. That you can probably do something about it. Problem is that the data in this case had changed. Also revertible, but the data was important. That change was important. Like it was an actual business use case where we'll give you some background instead of jumping right in. We had a service that was again fetching some data from SQL, and it was quite a large bit of data. It was basically an entire, like a very large payload, but still within limits to begin with. What happened was somebody made like a bulk change and added quite a bit of data to that supposed payload that we were supposed to fetch. And so that payload kind of ballooned from a few kbs in size to like
MBs.
almost 15 to 20 MBs in size. And of course we were fetching this whole chunk of data, like this entire row set, in a single query in one operation. And so what started happening was immediately after that change, it began bottlenecking our servers basically, because like the requests were coming in for that particular bit of data. Our servers were establishing connections to the database and starting to fetch the data. Now the data being 15-20 MBs was taking a lot of time to load. So almost every connection on to the database was blocked on the same big query, and that was kind of starving everything else and choking our system entirely. So yeah, so then we had to, I mean, we couldn't ask them to just forget about it, like revert the change and delete those newly added
Schema
rows.
change, right?
Yeah, not the schema change. It was more of a just added rows, but so many rows that it completely blew up our system.
Choked everything.
Yeah, so it wasn't an option to ask them to kind of scale that back. So we had to, so we put a couple of caching layers in place. We put in memory cache. We used Caffeine basically, which not only caches your stuff in memory. So there was an entirely in memory snapshot of that row set, like a row cache in memory. And what it also gave us, caffeine, was that it kind of maintains, like it synchronizes your lookups for the same key. So if two threads or two requests want that same piece of data, they won't run the same query over two different connections. You can configure your cache such that the backend calls for the same key are only made once. And so that also kind of basically just putting in an in-memory cache saved us on that occasion. And it was like a
Oh,
5-6 hours kind of a sprint to get this out. And during that time, we had no choice but to just keep restarting our servers. So we actually wrote a cron that restarted our servers every 5 minutes. So I don't even remember what that was. But we were essentially just restarting our
something
servers and
similar.
we had us fix.
Something similar happened to me. So one time the DB admin, uh, he he tells everyone in the group that okay guys, there is one request that's talking a lot of processing bandwidth on our SQL servers,
Right.
and they they gave us the machine name as latitude something something something, and a
Right.
lot of people hadn't changed their host name from the laptop,
Mm.
something like that.
Mm.
So then what happened was that people were searching exactly who the user was, and then he was like, okay, I found the IP, this is the IP that's doing the request. And it wasn't a server IP, it was one of the office IPs, and I figured out it was my IP. The thing was, I had opened Python, I had opened a MS SQL client in my Python CLI session, and started making a request, and the process crashed. I don't know, somehow. So as a result of that, the cursor didn't close. So my
Okay.
CLI crashed, but the server was still processing the query.
Okay. But
And since
okay.
I didn't close the
Mm.
cursor, it was still there. The process was still going on.
Right.
So yeah,
So it didn't clean up the underlying
How
connection, basically.
no, it didn't. So contact your DB administrator
Administrator.
whenever your CLI crashes while working on
Right.
Python with a
Right.
DB. That's what
But
it was.
imagine suspecting a DDoS and wondering who the attacker is. It turns out it's
Oh
just a
yeah,
random guy.
DDoS
It's a
happens a
slow,
lot of
slow
time, and
Loris
then
from
we
your
figure
own.
out that it's just we figure out it's usually just a health check that no one uh, considered adding excluding from our DDoS alerts.
Right.
Has this happened to you? Like if people think, oh, it's a DDoS, but then you figure out, oh
It's
no,
a
it's just
health
a
check.
health check
Uh,
request.
no, it hasn't happened to
No,
us yet.
this has never happened.
No, damn it.
But I mean, do you health check that often? You guys are pretty concerned about your app's health, and if you're
Going down,
if
yeah.
you're health checking at a rate that makes your app thinks it's being DOSed.
Oh, that's because some services don't even get that much traffic. So health check is more
Oh,
frequent than
it might be a
getting traffic.
percentage basis. Oh, traffic has spiked 200%.
Yeah,
2 requests to
yeah,
4
something like that.
requests.
Yeah. Someone started a new health check without telling DevOps, and the alert starts triggering because a new
Right,
health check request is now getting logged.
right. Does it happen to you guys where you configure an alert and something in your system changes and it makes that alert like useless or moot or just incorrectly configured so that it just keeps firing for no reason, and people, rather than fixing that alert, just say, oh yeah, this happens, and just let it be. I have about 3 or 4 alerts configured
Well,
right now where they used to be proper alerts. The system changed such that whatever was triggering those alerts is not used anymore, or those data points are not produced anymore. And yeah, those alerts just keep coming in rather than fixing it. And some people are just like, oh yeah, that's just how it is. Mute the channel and
That's
you
go
just
back.
just have to
this is the height of
remove the alert.
laziness. Who
Yeah, just
changes
remove the alert.
shit like that without changing the side effects? God
Yeah.
damn.
The
And
art
speaking,
of
yeah, go ahead. Sachin.
yeah. Sorry, nothing. I was just making a
So
lame
what
joke.
happened? So I was talking about like issues where what happens if the alerting system goes down, right? So we had an incident where we had some alerts set up on top of a data pipeline, like based on how the data moves, and that data pipeline was prone to lag, right? So data would kind of
Mhm.
not populate for some time. what used to happen was for that interval, we basically had no data points, right? So what happened was in cases where it was just a case of data lagging, there used to be like a whole lot of alerts triggered, like a lot of false alarms triggered. And a lot of people got woken up in the middle of the night, and it turned out that it was just that the data pipeline was lagging. And so yeah, so that also kind of could cause issues in places where your alerts are relying on
because
data,
you put a
which is spurious.
because you put a threshold on the lag amount, right?
Exactly. Not on the lag amount, but on a min threshold. If something falls below a min, if some metric falls below a min, alert someone, wake somebody up. And what used to happen was that was zero, right? Which is definitely less than the min because there were no data points. So the metric, of course, count was zero. And so
Okay.
alerts were triggered, people were called, paged or whatever.
Oh, usually these
Whatever
kind
it
of
is.
issues you have to figure out what actual metric to put the alert on.
Yeah, we actually had what we did for us. It was a simple fix on this particular occasion where what we did was we just reversed the alert. So, what like if we were looking for a metric to fall below a certain min, like a success rate, let's say to fall below a certain min, we just changed the metric to a failure rate going above a max, which in our case was doable because the metric was suitable. But I don't know how it. We would have to have a little more nuanced alerting in case of metrics where you can't do that, where you have to go, is this metric below the threshold and is there no lag at this point? Only then trigger something like that, which I think would be easily
something
doable
of that sort.
like that Prometheus thing that you just talked about, that query language, which might give you the leeway to do something like that.
Right. In general, though, the other approach that you mentioned, where just check whether the failure rate exceeds a certain amount, that is a much better, I think, litmus test just to make sure that there is actually something wrong and not just a fault in the pipeline or something.
Yeah.
It's not a guarantee, but still more likely for that to have been the case.
Yeah.
Another example is that before we used to put a alert on the lag of a particular Kafka topic. So if we've got like 500 messages lagging, then raise the alert. So what used to happen was that sometimes when the message, so that depend on the rate of messages that we were getting, right? So if the input message stream rate increases, then this lag also increases. But we know that eventually the lag will go away because this burst of message streams is not continuous. So that used to give us a lot of false alarms because we know in the end this message lag is going to get cleared because the input message stream increased rate is temporary. So later on what we did was instead of putting an alert on the lag, we put an alert on the message processing rate. So if 0 messages were processed per minute or per second for a period of 15 minutes or a period of 1 hour, that means the pipeline has gone down, right? Since no messages are passing through it. So that was the correct approach to set up alerts,
Right. So you did the
which
reverse
prevented
basically.
the.
In your case, with your metric, you had to do the reverse. Kind of.
Reverse, I didn't get.
I mean, reverse of what we had to do basically.
Okay.
Yours was on a lag rate threshold, right? If lag rate
Yeah.
goes above 500 messages, then alert. You changed it to if success rate goes below, so like goes to zero, then alert, right? Which was the opposite of what the example we had that I talked about. We had to do the opposite.
Pretty
Yeah,
much.
Somewhat same, but the lag rate wasn't there. There was just lag. Then we changed it to a rate-based
Yeah.
alerting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. It was an absolute value of lag, not lag per whatever second or.
Yeah. So with the rate-based alerting, we defined that if the rate is 0 for a specific amount of time, then we know this is broken. So
Right.
that also factors in time, the second thing, the rate-based thing. So basically, you need to figure out what your data requires to get a proper alerting metric
Yeah,
and
that's
get
true.
avoid false positives. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was watching this YouTube video where the guy was talking about interviews and how, and a question that he generally asks people is that I have a application, a GUI, and that hits a like a API endpoint, and there is a sort of a proxy in the middle, a reverse proxy in the middle, and I have an issue now. How do you debug it? So he justifies asking the question. He says that I don't want an exact answer or something. I just want to know how people think and in which areas do they specifically go for, right? Like,
The
does
debugging
someone focus
process.
on the reverse proxy? Does someone focus on the database? Does someone focus on the API or the GUI? So it's pretty interesting. But I mean, how would you guys tackle it if this actually happens?
I don't
So
know.
what exactly is the error? The GUI stops working on the client.
That was the thing that when the guy presses a button to submit something, the
Mhm.
whole thing freezes, and there is a sort of a lag, and then it's active after the it's active after a while is the thing. So the first thing
Okay.
I thought of was that the button event system and all should technically not be synchronous, whatever the request is happening. So at least when the button is hit, the GUI should not freeze. So that is definitely one point to debug it. But
Yep.
then obviously there could be others as well. I mean,
Yeah.
even after that, you might have a fault with the reverse proxy or with the database not being indexed or the server just taking too much time for some reason.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, you usually follow cascade, right? From the client side JavaScript, which is the synchronous bit, then you go to the reverse proxy to check if load is being balanced properly. If not that, then you then go into the server and see what part of the request is taking most of the time. That you could get to know with flame graphs, but I don't know. I've never used flame graphs to debug anything. So we just log in DB access times and Elasticsearch request response cycle times. And based on that, we see which actual external service is taking most of the time and try to improve that, maybe cache things, something like that. So it's a whole, a flow that you have to follow the
Yeah, yeah,
pipeline
yeah,
Yeah.
and
definitely,
you go.
definitely.
Yeah. Yes. Same answer. Plus one.
I guess we're gonna crack his
What
interview.
else? Yep,
Yeah, he's going to take
it's
Darshan and
totally.
assume I copied from him. So only one of us is getting it.
I mean, it's technically not an incorrect answer. It's also not an uncommon answer.
Yeah.
But I think you might want to go into specifics or something. Yeah, yeah. We'll get the job. It's fine.
Well, our experience should count for something.
True, true.
Yeah. If anyone asks this interview question, we'll direct them to episode 3. Go watch that. You'll get your answers.
Please refer.
Yeah. This is definitely not a reference for our future employers. Please.
Our
Yeah.
thoughts are our own. We are not endorsed.
Yeah, yeah. For all you know, we have one episode on some language that they're really proud of.
Right.
We're
And
just
trashes.
bashing it or something.
Trashing it. Yep.
They just blacklist us. This is definitely not something that should go on a resume.
Yeah. I wonder though if anyone would even spend that much time watching. If their background checks would be that
Yeah,
rigorous.
that's fair. That's fair.
Yep.
They listen to
Imagine
the
some
hell.
company actually transcribes our podcast and does some NLP, machine learning, voodoo magic on our podcast, and then determines us not to be a fit for the company.
Yeah, a company spending that much time doing
I
this.
should not be giving people ideas.
No, but also that I mean, not everyone has a podcast. So why do you think
Uh,
there's some company that
no, no,
specifically does this
but
just to vet the three of us?
this could also be used for people with social media, right? For background checks. social media background checks also this would work,
Probably,
right?
probably. It could, but should it? Social media is, I mean, a personal account is usually exactly personal. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
you
don't
never
think it
know
should count in hiring.
what some
Do you
corporates
guys?
You know,
demand of you.
Yeah, fair, fair, fair. Do you
no,
guys ever check the social media of whatever resume you get for interviews and shit?
no, I,
I don't think I've done that.
I've never done that. I do check the
The
resume.
most I've
I
done
don't
is
remember.
probably GitHub if they've
Right.
mentioned it.
Yeah, GitHub
However,
I
What do you
do
check, Bina?
have a look.
that I do check the social media of engineers that I like admire or whose work I come across. I'm like, oh, what's this guy's background? And I kind of talk them on
That's
that.
just talking, Bina.
Yeah, I sugarcoat it, but yeah,
That's just the point, the purpose of LinkedIn's existence.
right.
What? Stalking
You
employees?
stalk bigwigs.
Stalking bigwigs, yeah, bigwigs or smart people that you might come across.
Right.
That's something I
Sure,
do.
sure, sure. We know your stalking history, Bina. It's cool. You don't have to front.
Right. Thanks for outing me on the podcast, but yeah,
I mean, I haven't yet.
yeah, you just teased it. Maybe in episode
We've only
100,
confirmed
when
whatever
we hit
you've been
100K
mentioning.
subscribers, maybe.
That looks like a
Yes.
pipe dream from where you are right now. 2 subscribers.
Yeah,
One of them is
one
us.
at a time. Yeah.
Not even all three of us have subscribed.
Yep.
Right, one at a time.
Lost
Right.
cause.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should talk about debugging and also how you maybe something about temperament. Like I specifically panic a lot when things happen. Basically, if anything goes wrong and I get paged, my first reaction is just raw panic. And yeah, so that's how it started when I started working. But like slowly, it's this. What happens? I've realized that I'll panic in the beginning, so I let the wave of panic pass. So the first 2 minutes is sheer panic, and then things settle down, and I kind of get into the mode of okay, now how do I debug this? How do I fix this? But yeah, do you
Fair,
guys
fair.
That
do you
even
guys panic or is it just me? Do you guys like are very cool with are you guys very cool with handling issues and things going wrong?
I never panicked because my most of my applications were admin application. So even if there was some issue or something went down, the data in the backend was safe because those were in SQL databases. All
Right.
I needed to change was my code so that the UI, admin UI, starts working again, and the backend can fetch the data from SQL. So I never had a pressure. So I never had to panic whenever something went wrong.
I mean, I also used to work on admin apps, and I used to panic even then. I was new, and I was like, "Oh, people are getting
Oh,
inconvenienced. Users are not able to
When
use
you're
it."
new, it's yeah. When you're new, it's completely understandable. You
no, but
panic
in
at the
that case,
slightest of things that go wrong. When you're responsible even for a little application or a little like a small even a small section of the an application, and
Yeah,
things go wrong, you panic. But eventually, I think you just become a little jaded. Like yeah, we'll figure it out. It's
yeah,
it's not that serious. It's fine.
but in
But
that front, Rohan, my mentors and my product manager were pretty chill. They never put any pressure like, oh no, you have to fix this now. Like this is broken, try
sure,
and fix
sure.
this. You know,
Yeah,
there's no
definitely.
one putting any pressure on me at that time. So that
Though
really helped me a lot.
no, it's more the pressure that I mean, at least the way I've seen it, it's more pressure that you put on yourself. Where
Oh,
and I've seen this with the newer batches as well, where even a
okay.
small thing that because it's the first thing that you're doing, right? And if that goes
Uh-huh.
wrong, it's like I was supposed to do one thing
that
and I
went wrong.
fucked even that up. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, you
Meanwhile,
learn with your
everyone around
mistakes.
you is like, chill, no one gives a fuck.
yeah. No, but
So
that
that
that's
does
good.
happen, and then
That's good that
you
you don't get
learn.
pressure because
Right, right.
I've had instances where people just have like throw you a slight barb, just like oh, just by the way, this is this is breaking this or this is affecting this. Like yeah, I can see that. I am looking at the numbers as well. and it's just like one of those passive aggressive fix this ASAP kind of thing, where it just irks me.
Yeah.
I get it that it's a perfectly okay thing to notify me that yes, this is breaking something in case I didn't know, but I just take it many times as a slight. Like I know that I know what the problem is, and of course I'm looking into it. You don't need to tell me that something's wrong. I take it as a personal insult. Did you think I'm slacking off and I'm not going to fix it?
Well, as someone who's also been on the other side, if sometimes the SSO that is used across the admin applications, sometimes it does go down, and a lot of the times that I've mentioned it to, I might have been the person who reported it first, and there are other times when I was definitely not the guy who reported it first. So I think it goes both ways because I don't know what others have reported. Uh, it just I can't just let it go.
So we have a
It's
group.
not.
We have a
Yeah,
group
fair.
with people on it. So if one person notifies us on the group, other people also know that okay, there's some
Yeah,
issue. We shouldn't bug
that
them
is
down.
that is
That
definitely
helps.
that's
Yeah,
definitely
I get your point.
how it's done now.
But the example I was giving is where you already notified on the group or whatever on the channel, Slack channel, Flow group.
Oh,
Yeah,
That
even
yeah, yeah.
then.
I've been
the guy's looking into it.
yeah.
Oh,
Okay, the guy said, "Yeah, I'm looking into it. I'm
yeah.
checking." And then on top of that, you add one little sentence there saying, "Oh, this is
Uh,
affecting this." Yeah, I know. I maintain the service. I know what it's affecting.
Dude, I've shown this to you. I have
Okay.
shown this to you. I've mentioned this to you like every uh, every other day at least. This happens where some interface I manage has an issue with the data lagging or something. I mean, it basically has an issue with say the query times being a little high, and there's someone who messages on the group that this interface is down.
So
First of all, the interface is not down. The interface is working fine. But anyway, they go, this interface is down, and then someone from the data team goes, oh, okay, I'm checking, and then there are just people that go plus one, plus one, plus one, and
Uh,
I don't know what is the thought process there,
I don't know.
even
especially because
GitHub issues
Arctic
collapses
does
those plus one comments. You notice?
what?
Have you seen GitHub issues where people are commenting plus one? GitHub just collapses those comments into one comment
Oh,
and
dude, so
say,
what is the whole point of plus one when there are still features like likes and
Yeah,
reactions and
likes.
all?
yeah,
Yeah.
there's likes, use the like system or something.
Yeah, and
Spamming,
especially after someone has responded saying they're checking, it is just plus one, plus one. I mean, come on,
Maybe.
it's just it's just unnecessarily passive aggressive.
spamming,
Yeah.
dude.
Look, for the
Spamming.
first time, I get it because people might think, oh, the person who's debugging it might think that it's only for that particular user. And so by saying plus one, you're saying that, oh, it's happening for a bunch of users or across the system. I get that for the first, let's say, two plus ones. But then, yeah, I'm also on those groups, Rohan, that you're talking about. And it's just people just, I don't know, pile on like it's some kind of, if I don't put a plus one, they won't fix it for me kind of a situation, which is,
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? We have a group for nearly all interfaces. This has never happened on any others.
yeah,
I don't know
it's never
what it is
happened.
about this particular thing that just makes users be that passive aggressive, like plus one, plus one, plus one. Man, at some point we just wanna go back to the guy who said checking and say plus one. Guys, he's checking, please.
Right. Do you,
Checking.
Yeah.
when issues happen, do you guys follow like a detailed like RCA or some kind of thing there where you kind of just create a document of what happened and what went wrong and how it went wrong?
No, dude. We just fix the issue and move on, I guess.
It
Very
depends.
Exactly.
rarely.
I usually do that if I mean this is a classic. It's not a bug. It's a feature. But if that is the case, then yes, I always try to document it and talk to the people that this is how the code was intended to be. Not the code. This is how the flow was intended to be. And if there is a problem in the flow, we'll have to change it. But it's definitely not a bug as things stand. So
Right.
that's more a miscommunication than a issue per se, where one person wants a particular thing and the other person wants the flow to be something else. It does happen rarely, but when it does, it's like not often you get to flex the classic ID lines, right? Have you tried restarting it and
Running it
it's
off
not
and on
a
again.
it's not a bug, it's a feature.
Oh, we always have to do this, huh? Whenever, so before we had this, what do you say? The hash, you append the hash to your JavaScript files, right? For the browser to reload it. Or
Yeah,
old,
cache busting thing.
or sorry, what is it called?
It's the cache busting thing, right?
Cache
The
busting.
the
Yeah,
what the content hash basically.
yeah. So content hash, we didn't used to have it in our project. So what used to happen was like every time a new change was pushed, we used to get calls about the site not working, and we had to tell them you have to press Control Shift
Hard
R,
refresh.
hard refresh. So after that, we were like, nope, we need to find a plugin that does that, and we found it.
Right,
So it
right.
was a PHP project, right? So PHP had this asset compress thingy in Cake PHP framework. So
Okay.
so I didn't used to use the asset compress thingy that generate the content hash. So I used to get this issue, and then later on I figured it out how to use it.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's not a CLI thing. You have to call the PHP code. So, so since PHP is a templating language, rather than just writing script tags and importing JavaScript, Cake PHP asset compress library allowed you to write some PHP function, and it used to auto generate the script statements that would import JS files.
Oh, okay.
Right. So before that, I just used to write JS script, the script tags, and the cache bursting thing wouldn't work. So that was the issue that I found.
Mhm.
Holy
So that
shit,
was
dude.
my. Have you
That's so
tried turning it
convoluted.
off and on again? Yeah, PHP is like that. Have you tried hard
Yeah, yeah.
refreshing it and trying? That used to be my response.
Sure,
Right.
sure. It doesn't seem like a PHP problem. Though. This seems like this could happen for any server-side language. To replace
It
PHP with
would,
anything and it'd still be that way. The
I
cache
guess,
busting
yeah.
thing is, yeah, yeah. But
Bug mistakes.
earlier, I think instead of the content hash, they used to just append like a query param v1,
Yeah.
v2 kind of a thing.
Right.
Right.
That's all. But content hash is obviously much better because the chunking of the files you can just bunch the part that is changed basically.
Right.
Yeah, because V1, V2, you have to keep a track of the counter, right?
Sure, you do.
Yeah.
I mean, nowadays anyway, everything is automated, so you just have to make this once and then not worry about it ever again. So checking cache busting is not even part of the normal debugging steps that we follow.
About content hashes, this guy called Joe Armstrong, the guy who made Erlang, he always used to go on and on about why the most stressful thing about file system is that you have to name your files. You have to just think about what the name of the file should be. It should just be the hash. The name of the file should just be the hash of the file, and you don't need to think about names anymore. You can just then search for the contents in the file rather than searching for the name of the file.
Okay, I'm gonna need some more context because just that one statement just
Yeah.
sounds
Sounds.
incredibly weird. It's
Yeah,
yeah, I
maybe
need
it's
to
a
add a
old
virtual
man thing.
host, perhaps.
Maybe it's
No,
an
but I
old
mean,
man thing.
definitely need more context. Maybe he's talking about specific files or something. Otherwise, like, I need to add a virtual host. Yeah, why don't you go to slash 3456789 by 1FE23? It's random. Even
Yeah.
directories would then be a hash that keeps changing. How does that work?
Have you guys ever worked with these tag-based file directories rather than hierarchy-based ones?
No.
No.
Uh, Give me an
They
What?
seem
example.
interesting. So, I mean, I don't have a example, but there's this. I remember someone posting on 4chan about this image viewer. So one common use case is that people have this reaction image folder, right, where they've got these memes to use as a reaction to certain events, right? So most
Sure,
people,
sure. People have meme
yeah,
folders.
meme folders, yeah. So organization is a huge problem, right? So storing in folders, it does not make sense because some photos can belong to two different folders, right? So in
Yep.
that case, you use a tag-based storage system rather than a hierarchy-based storage system. Just something that was
Hmm.
interesting.
Hmm.
Sure.
Essentially, right.
So the
Essentially,
hash-based
if you
thing would work
symlink
in a
the
tag-based storage.
essentially if you had
I-
one physical directory and you basically symlinked it in every topical directory, you'd kind of achieve this, right?
You achieve this, but then you have to keep track of all the dangling symlinks also.
Yeah, you do.
If it's a soft link.
Yeah.
That sounds like it's an issue.
Yeah, it is, right? So that's why you need tag-based
Reference counted. You
file
need reference
systems.
counted. Symlinks.
Oh, that's just over engineering, man. Let's have let the next topic be over
Yes,
engineering.
have a lot of stories.
Bloat and
Yeah.
over engineering.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just to
Yes.
stay true to the topic, we can just really research about over engineering.
Right. I think I'm pretty learned from experience in over engineering. I mean, I've seen a lot of it.
Real life experience. Seen a lot of shit.
Probably done some of it as well.
Uh,
But yeah,
oh yeah,
I think
dude. Yeah,
let's leave that for the next one. Shall we? Do we have anything that
Debugging.
we've not talked about yet? Debugging.
Okay.
debugging. Yeah.
You use PHP, right, you guys? PHP
Yes.
code you've
I
written.
have never ever once used the
DB.
PHP debugger.
Oh, you haven't? Man, I've used
No.
Xdebug, and setting up was a huge pain in the ass. I never want to set it up again. Thank God I never had to switch laptops.
I did too actually, but
Oh yeah,
after I
man.
did same thing happened to me. I set up Xdebug, then I had to switch my laptop and decided I'm not doing this all over again, and so resorted to the old school dump and die.
Dump and die. Yep.
Exactly. Because
It's
genuinely, I don't know whether it's a function of the type of code that we are writing or something. I've never really missed having a debugger in PHP. And on the other hand, whenever I've written stuff in Java, it's using a debugger is just much easier, I feel.
Yeah.
Even in JavaScript, a lot of the times debugger is helpful, but
Oh,
it's just a simple console.log and all helps sometimes.
In JavaScript, why a debugger is helpful because you sometimes you misunderstand what the scope of the variable would be, and your assumption that the value of a variable might really differ from what the actual value is during the runtime. So
I
at
mean,
that time,
not anymore. I don't think with the whole var. I mean the let and const and the whole strict mode ES6 stuff. I don't think that's ever an issue
yeah,
anymore.
but with the strict
In fact,
mode,
I wouldn't be
you never
surprised
know
if
when
most
your
people.
value is null, right?
Uh,
Sometimes your value is null because of strict mode or something, and you just assume it wrong. That kind of thing happens,
I'm
man.
trying to think when would that happen? Why would you? In what case would you assume it's null? Like it's not been
So
initialized properly or something?
it's not been initialized, or let's say some function like slice. Does slice return null? Okay, so some index. So after slicing and getting some index, you get a null value, and on that you are accessing some property. So at that time you get an error, right? So you need to know
Hmm.
why you're getting this null value because of which.
That's what I'm saying. That if it's
Accessing,
that,
yeah.
then a console.log is not it's not particularly bad. You could very easily figure out that that's where
Yeah,
your
but what if it is
thing
a
happened. But
huge chain of something dot
yeah,
something dot something?
yeah. But also in loops and all, it's pretty helpful. When there is a loop that is updating a particular object or something, their debuggers are incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
So
Yep, because of mutations,
if
right?
it's breaking on like the fifth iteration or something, uh, debugger is much better than just trailing through a whole array of consoles.
Yeah.
But in PHP, I don't know, man. Xdebug, I just never got into it. maybe that's bad practice or something. But a simple dump and die, because mostly Laravel, a
Yeah.
simple dump and die has always been more than enough. What about you guys? Is there some particular debugging tool that you guys rely on?
No, I'm just the same with PHP. I don't mess with TextDebug, and with Java, of course, the debugger. There are a few legacy apps that I had worked on where even I didn't even bother setting up the debugger. I just did the old system.out.println. But yeah, Java, I think debuggers are much more useful than maybe in PHP.
Yeah,
With
fair.
Node, debugging is simple because your Node binary itself has a debugging flag, I think, which
Yes.
starts a debug server, and that's pretty easy to integrate with JetBrains IDs.
Right.
JetBrains, please sponsor us. Hit us with.
Someday.
Yeah, man.
That's
Cool.
debugging then. I think we've covered
Yeah,
what we wanted to cover. So see you guys on the
yeah.
next one. Thank you very much for watching this far. Bye bye.
See you guys. See you guys. Bye bye.
Bye.
See you guys.